Alright, so I wasn't going to make this video. Barbarella was on my to-do list, but then I got to it, and then I was like, I don't really feel like talking about it, just right now. So I was going to cross it off, and it was crossed off, and then YouTube put Barbarella on their platform for free. So I was like, well, now I need people to, when they see that, maybe this will entice them to sort of take a look at it, because I'm going to need more people to see this movie before the remake comes out. All right, so, um, oh, and I do still want to do the other videos that I said I was going to do, the searching, nope, spree essay. That's coming down the line, but this was supposed to be before that anyway, so here we are. Um, so, Barbarella. The first time I ever saw this movie was way back in the days of cable. Um, and I'm just flipping through movie channels, and I just happen to catch it during the scene where Barbarella is being attacked and the angel dude is helping her out, and she has to like kick the gun towards him so that he can fight them off, but he's blind so he can't really see. And I'm just like, what am I watching now? It was just very odd. It was my first time seeing anything like that, like an old sci-fi movie. This was like way back in, oh gosh, how long ago was it? It was definitely like maybe 2012, 2013, something like that. Like, very long time ago, almost 10 years ago. But that's how I first saw it. And then later on, like, I didn't watch the whole movie all the way through. Like I said, I was flipping channels. I just saw that one weird scene. I saw the title. Like, I was looking at the guy and was like, okay, there's the title. And there's the plot summary. Still doesn't really tell me all that much about it. And I was like, just keep passing through. Didn't really think about it much until later on when I'm starting to go through my whole cinephile phase and I'm watching older movies and I get to like the 60s era and I'm like, let me go ahead and check out Barbarella, see what that's about. And I really enjoyed it. So that is how I discovered it. Um, at the time of this video, because I wanted to look up more, mostly behind the scenes things, but it's kind of hard to find behind the scenes, footage of things from that time, especially like sci-fi movies, which are considered like B movies, and especially a sex comedy. People aren't really, taking too much, preservation for that. But when I looked at, first I found there was a musical, had a very short run on stage, and I'm kind of upset that I'll probably never be able to actually hear the music from it, but life goes on. And apparently there is a remake officially in the works now. I think there's a trailer out. I haven't seen it, but my thing is that I know people kind of had this opinion about remakes, and it really does sort of hold true that the remake can rarely ever hold a candle to the original. Like, I really don't think any Barbarella they make now is going to have the same sauce as it did in the 60s. And that really just has to do with our attitudes towards sex and women's liberation changing. I don't want to get too into that just yet because I feel like that's a whole other conversation about how we as a society feel towards sex and how that shows in our movies, because our movies are so different from the way they are back in the 60s and 70s, back when that sexual revolution was happening. Women are a lot more liberated now, but I'm going to talk about it another time. But yeah, I'm not going to discuss the remake, one, because it's not out now, and I really don't really want to have anything to do with it. I'm talking about the movie from the 60s, 1968, and I would talk about the comics, but they seem kind of hard to come by as well. But let's go ahead and talk about this movie. So the premise of the movie is that Barbarella is this space explorer. She's a scientist. She works for the Earth government. And she's supposed to find this other scientist who has apparently been suspected of making a weapon. Now, because this is the future, as that previous century imagined it, we are all at peace. We have no need for weapons. We have no need for conflicts. So the fact that there's a person, somebody somewhere else making a weapon, that's a cause for concern. So her job is to find this guy and, bring him in. So she goes to where he's supposed to be, but her ship crashes down on the planet and she's stranded and lost, and she just goes on this whole sort of adventure. So that's the premise. And of course, she does eventually find the guy, but the movie isn't really so much about, her trying to find him. It's really about her adventures and the trials she has to go through in that. And I would be remiss if I didn't, mention the whole sexcapade aspect, because that's pretty much the main reason that anybody who has heard of this movie will see it, is because of the sexual content. Yes, for free on YouTube. Yes, it has everything. Like, I literally just watched some of it just now just to see if, like, have they cut anything out? Have they censored it? I watched that first scene, and no, they did not. It's crazy, right? What things are and aren't allowed on platforms. Ridiculous. That's a whole other conversation. Let me make myself clear. I'm not upset that YouTube put it up. I just feel like sometimes, the owners of these websites will say one thing and then do another. I'm just gonna leave it at that. But throughout her journey, Barbarella meets different people, mostly men, and she has sex with these men. All right. And something that we're going to put a pin in this because I want to talk about it later. But the way that sex is viewed in this universe is a whole lot different from the way that, we look at it. And it sort of goes in line with that burgeoning sexual revolution that was going on at the time, In Barbarella's universe, she comes from Earth, where, like I said, they have moved beyond conflicts. They moved beyond war. And so because of that, they've also moved beyond, just recreational sex, basically. So in the movie, the way that if you want to reach, completion, first you have to take some sort of psychological test to see if you're compatible with somebody, and then both of you guys take a pill, and then both of you press your hands together, sort of like Vulcan sex, I guess, and boom, it happens. And that's it. That's the end of it. That is the only sort of experience that Barbarella has at this time. So then she goes to this planet, which is not of the Earth government. It is just the sticks, the boonies. It's just way out there. These people don't have that sort of cultural context. They don't have that sort of idea. They're doing it the old-fashioned way. So it's about her, learning what the old-fashioned way is and figuring out and deciding for herself, hey, this is actually kind of nice. I'm kind of digging it. And I really like that idea that, like I said, it goes into how these movies did sex back then. And I'm feeling like maybe I want to do more research and actually, because I've seen like 70 sex comedies, so I'm really having that in the back of my head on how they view the act itself. But I do want to actually talk more in depth, because I just think it's so interesting how the fact that, women were starting to liberate themselves, and that was starting to be, I guess, commodified by entertainment, versus now the way that we see women's liberation and the way that it shows itself in movies is just so different. And I keep on trying to go back to that topic, and I don't want to make that this video, but it's something that needs to be talked about. I really think it does. But I just like the way that it's very carefree in the way that Barbarella approaches it, and the way that the men around her approach it even. Like, she is never really coerced into doing it. The men just sort of give her the option, like the very first time. She's like, I don't know what you're talking. You want to do it the old-fashioned way? Like, I've never done it that way before. And it does sort of read like a porno premise. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm sure that the titillation was definitely a factor into it. But I don't know. Just for me, I just like how lighthearted and carefree it is. How she does the act, and then she decides for herself that she likes it and that she wants to keep doing it. And then even later on in the movie, when she meets a guy who is used to doing it, the traditional way with the pills and just the hands and all that, and he tries doing that with her, and she's just like, this doesn't really do it for me anymore. Meanwhile, he's over here like, she's just like, okay. Good for you, I guess. But I just think that is such an interesting way to show somebody's, burgeoning sexuality and how it can manifest itself. Um, but that is the just the initial premise and just what happens to her. It's a bunch of different adventures. I would really like to just not talk too much about specifics because I really just want to do a stream of consciousness, video about this movie because I just don't really have a lot of people to talk to it about. It's a very old movie. It's a very kitschy, cheesy movie, so it's kind of hard to recommend just on the regular. But there's definitely a lot to talk about, including the outfits. So I will mostly be talking about Barbarella's outfits because she is like a Barbie doll. She goes through several outfit changes throughout this movie. But I will say the costumes for the rest of the cast also look very good. Some of them are kind of simple, but no one seems out of place here, basically. Like, they all sort of fit into what their character's supposed to be and how they're supposed to look and act like. So, let me start with Barbarella. She starts off with just this clunky, 60s era sci fi space astronaut suit. And then she does her, little striptease with it at the very beginning of the movie. From then on, like I said, she is cycling through different outfits. My favorite one is probably the green shimmery one. I don't know what it is. It's just like a lot of her outfits really are just a simple leotard. They don't really change the silhouette all that much. It's really just about the fabric, the color, the just the general like fabric and blocking of it that changes, and maybe a couple of accessories. But I don't know, the green one I just really think is just incredibly cute. Like, that's probably something you could wear very easily as like a Halloween costume. Very close second is like the silver outfit that she wears. I also do kind of like the sort of risque like black outfit that kind of has like one half of her chest out. I don't know, it just, that outfit just sort of tickles me. um, I do kind of want to talk about the Great Dictator's outfit, mostly because, like I said, I want you to keep in mind the era that this was made in and what was probably happening around that time. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that she does sort of play into the predatory lesbian trope, but unlike most, media, she doesn't really get punished for it. Like, the movie just sort of kind of ends in sort of a to be continued sort of way, and so she gets to live at the end. She doesn't die. But her outfit to me just really seems like it was really inspired by like the BDSM scene, which makes sense. She is a great dictator, so whips, black, leather, straps, all that, especially to contrast her with Barbarella, who's supposed to be much more pure, much more just, pure of heart, much more kind, much more naive. So obviously, it's very easy to show those two sides right there in just their outfits. Like, you can look at them and tell that they're supposed to be opposing sides. One is supposed to be evil and obviously much more experienced and, I would assume, more liberated sexually because she very proudly and confidently comes onto Barbarella. Um, and whereas Barbarella, even once she, figures out that she likes sex, she doesn't go so boldly for it. Um, she does, reciprocate and she does desire for it, but she's not like going up to dudes and, throwing herself at them. Um, so it's just easy to see that difference between them in the way that they look, in the way that they act. Um, Speaking of, let's go ahead and talk about what I don't, how should I say this? Because I don't think the movie really has a central like thesis or moral that it's trying to portray per se. I really do think it's just, a fun little cheesy sci-fi film that was just, you know, made because somebody liked the comics and they wanted to make a movie of it. All right. I really don't think there's anything super deep going into it, going into any of the thought. But thanks to, decades of it being out, decades of history and culture and evolution and revolution and all that, we can now look back at that and say, well, here's what they were actually saying. You know, maybe they didn't mean to say it, but here's what they were saying by what they did. And so one of the plot points is that the planet that Barbarella lands on is filled with like this sort of liquid, bubbling, toxic chemical substance. And it's kind of implied to be sentient almost. Um, so basically, at the climax of this movie, this toxic substance starts bubbling up, starts flooding, and people are in danger of dying. But they make it clear that it's attracted to, um, I guess you could say, negativity, to evilness, to darkness. Um, so at one point, Barbarella and the dictator end up getting like almost consumed by it, but then it just sort of like spits them both back up. Mostly because the dictator is with Barbarella. Like, I think that's the implication, that Barbarella is too pure to be sucked down by it. And this is after all of the events of the movie. After she has crashed and has had sex with like 3 different dudes, she is still considered pure and righteous and good. And still, pure and righteous and good enough to be saved by an angel. That's what they call the dude in the movie. He's not an actual angel. I think it's supposed to be like an alien race that looks like angels. But, I mean, we can take our metaphors, however we want them, with cream and sugar or nothing at all. So that's how I choose to take it. So I just think that's so interesting. Like, that's what really stood out to me the first time I saw this movie. Mind you, this is the first time, so a lot of things I'm being bombarded with a lot. But the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, after all that, she's still considered, pure. She's still considered good enough that she's not going to be sucked down by this toxic substance. And I just thought that was really cool. That was actually really nice, a good way to end the movie. And like I said, it sort of ends on a to be continued note, kind of, which makes sense. She's based off a comic book, and you never know about those movies. I'm sure somebody hoped that maybe it would get a sequel at some point, so you gotta leave things a little open-ended, and it really was open-ended now that I think about like the whole initial premise of that movie. But anyway, that's how it ends. The angel dude, Barbarella, and the dictator just fly off into the sunset for another adventure with Barbarella. Not the end, to be continued. So that's really all I wanted to talk about this movie. I guess maybe I'll try and be optimistic about the remake, because this movie does sort of hold a special place in my heart. The problem is, I can imagine how they would do it, and I just imagine it being too sleek and just having any sort of the edges sanded off it. I'm not saying that I want to sit in a theater and watch softcore porn, but I can see that they probably would not want to do those scenes, and it has to do with how we view sex now. But like, I'm gonna hold off on that because I feel like I want to do a more focused video on that. And you can tell how much I want to talk about it because I tried going back to the topic like 3 times in this video. But in general, my issue with remakes is they try and do the whole, like uber futuristic thing, right? They did it with the Star Trek movies, like the more modern ones with Chris Pine and all that. And I just think that one of the charms of these old movies is that when they imagined the future, they imagined the comforts of the things we have now. Just, in ships that could take you to the stars. So, like, for example, Barbarella's spaceship has shag carpeting. I highly doubt a modern remake would give the spaceship shag carpeting, or any sort of carpeting for that matter. All right? And that's something to think of too. The way that we think of the future is, it's so much more cold and lifeless. Whereas when you look at things like, I'm thinking about how the ships looked in 2001 A Space Odyssey, and I'm thinking of Barbarella's ship, and I'm thinking of others in that same vein. They didn't just think like, well, what will people sit on in the future? They thought, we're going to sit on the same things. It's just now it's flying in a ship that can take us to Venus, right? Um, that's where I'm going to end the video for now. Seems very inconclusive, but I really don't have much more to say. I like Barbarella. It's for free on YouTube now, so go and check it out before they take it away, because YouTube is working on the same system as other streaming platforms where it's going to be a constant cycling of different media. So if you don't get to see it now, you'll have to go somewhere else to find it. Somewhere that's probably not as readily accessible as YouTube. So I hope you get to check it out. I hope you get to find something meaningful in it, something entertaining, even if it's not the same things that I liked about it. Even if all you're doing is just watching because you want to see some 60s cheese. That's perfectly fine. But I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you. And love.
Love.